So yesterday I had my first smear test, so that's what this video is going to be about. I think it's important to talk about something like this and do a video because one, I might remind somebody that's not been for their smear test that needs to go. So if you've turned 25 and you've not done it yet, this is for UK, sorry, I don't know what it is in other countries. If you've hit 25 and you've not gone for your smear test, please go and do that. And two, I was very, very, very anxious about going for my test, and I'm hoping that by doing this video and explaining my own experience that it would make someone that was as anxious as I was feel a little bit more at ease. So I'm just kind of going to talk to you about how I went about making my appointment, what actually happened at the procedure. I know from looking online that it sounds really scary. The information that's online isn't always correct. I'm not saying what has happened to me is going to happen to you, but this is what happened with me, okay? So, I don't know, I think it's really important to talk about, and hopefully me explaining what happened to me will help someone. First of all, I had a doctor's appointment, just a general appointment anyway, and that's when I decided to first mention a smear test because I got my letter through because I'm 25 coming up later this year. So I had my letter through and I was having a right old panic. I was talking to my boyfriend. The idea of the test completely freaked me out. Why would I want something that looks like a duck's beak going into my vagina? I don't know, nobody wants that is the answer to that. So I was freaking out, telling my boyfriend about it. I got this letter, it's horrible. And it suggested that I go to a walk-in centre. Now, because I was so anxious, the last thing I wanted to do was go and sit at a walk-in centre and wait for maybe 2 hours, sitting there getting more and more anxious before the test. So when I went to the doctor's recently, I just mentioned that I'd had my letter and that I was worried about going to a walk-in centre and do they do it there, because not all GPs do the procedure, so you have to check with your GP. She said that it's fine, that they do the procedure there, but I think she could tell that I was quite anxious even when talking about it. So she kind of had a little conversation with me about was I feeling anxious, and I explained that I was. And she said that there was a particular nurse that's used to dealing with people that are a bit more anxious about that type of thing. So she booked me in with one of the nurses that was going to do it, so I had like 2 weeks to wait. You can get in a bit quicker than that usually, I think, but with work I couldn't get in any other date, so I booked that appointment, and then for the next 2 weeks, just every now and then it would pop into my head and I'd be like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I've got to do this. It got to the evening before my test and I had what I think was an anxiety attack. I don't really suffer with anxiety. I've had a few panic attacks in my life before because I'm very claustrophobic, and that's led to a panic attack. It wasn't a panic attack, this feeling. I think from looking online and talking to my boyfriend, I think it was an anxiety attack. My chest really tight, I couldn't really breathe properly. Felt like I wasn't fully able to breathe in. And at the time, it might not necessarily just have been for because of the smear test. I've got a few deadlines and there's a few different things that I was stressed out about. So I don't think that the upcoming test was really helping. The morning of the test, I was really anxious. I was so nervous, and I must have peed like 20 times. Too much information. I'm a nervous peer. Sometimes you're a nervous eater, sometimes you're a nervous pooer, sometimes you're a nervous talker. I am a nervous peer. So I was up and down, wandering around. It was at 10 o'clock in the morning and I was already up at 8. I was like, oh my goodness, this is going to be horrible. I had so many things, like questions, and wondering like what size is the speculum? Does it hurt going in before it's even opened? Can you feel the swab inside? Was it going to be really painful? And because one of my main issues was that I was so anxious that I thought, well, because I'm anxious, I'm going to be tensed up, and then that's going to make it hurt even more. So I was getting annoyed with myself for being anxious because I thought it might hurt more, but I was anxious about getting hurt. And I did not have a good morning. I got myself really worked up. I went to my appointment and the woman was really lovely. She asked me, when I first got there, a couple of questions, and then she asked me on a scale of 1 to 10 how nervous or how much I'm dreading the procedure. And in my head immediately I was like, but the what came out was 7. And she was like, right, so quite high then. I thought, well, good job I didn't say 50, isn't it? She was really lovely. She was able to help try and calm me down. She showed me the speculum, and it was so much smaller than I thought it was going to be for some reason. After Googling images, don't Google images of a speculum. You get these terrible images of this big metal thing that looks like a huge beak of some massive duck. And it looks quite horrifying. It was just a little plastic, it wasn't anywhere near as big as I was imagining. And I was like, right, okay, so that might not hurt as much, that might be okay. But I was still freaking out. And I have to say, I'm not ashamed to admit it, I had a few tears at this point because I wasn't full on crying, like sobbing or anything, but it was just like, oh my god. Okay, full on freaking out. Because I was so worked up and so anxious, and she was asking me, she asked me, have you had any friends or family that have had the procedure that you've spoken to? And in my head I was like, only the things I've read online. So you obviously have horror stories of things that you've read online, but I didn't really tell her that I'd read those. So I just told her that I was really anxious. I had my couple of tears, had a bit of a tissue, and I was like, okay, fine, I'm ready to do it. She talked me through what she was going to be doing. She showed me the little brush. She let me feel it on my hand. It's like a little rubbery brush. It's really very soft. Sorry, I got something in my eye. I was still quite anxious at this point. She had me, but at this point, even though I was anxious, I was like, I can't just sit here just not doing it. So she asked me if I was ready. I said yes, and she asked me to take my underwear off. So if you're thinking about what you're going to be wearing, if you wear a dress or a skirt that's a bit kind of floaty, I get that you get a bit more dignity, I guess, because you're able just to pull your kind of pants down from underneath your dress rather than whipping your trousers off and struggling with your Joni jeans, trying to pull them off the end of your leg in the doctor's room. So I would recommend a dress of some sort, because if that's something you're a bit uncomfortable about, it kind of, you can lay it over the top of you and you might feel a little bit more covered. So maybe I would recommend wearing a dress of some sort. That's what I did. So I took my pants off, I sat on the bed, and she had me lie down on the bed. And what she asked me to do was to lift my feet up to my knees. And then she wanted me to just drop my knees. So I was sort of this kind of, just drop your knees to the side, make yourself really comfortable. She just let me kind of, she had a little chat with me, she was talking to me while she was getting things out that she needed. So she was so lovely, and made me feel really relaxed, and she said that I was doing really well because she's had other people that have been in such a panic that they've not been able to do the actual test because they're shaking so much. So she was able to calm me down by letting me know that I was doing well. So if you're able to speak to your doctor and get a nurse that's going to be really calming and not and just kind of be aware of the fact that you're really anxious, if you are, then that's a good thing to do, I think, because this nurse really helped me. She got the little speculum out. Now the speculum, it does, as I've said, it looks a bit like a duck's beak, and then at the bottom there's like a little kind of clasp on it. And what they do is they slide, they put something on to make it easier to go in, so don't worry about that. It might be a little bit cold. I think that some people put it in hot water or something to kind of warm it up to body temperature. They kind of just slide it into your vagina, and then what they do is they sort of just very, very slowly squeeze on the little handle so that it starts to very slowly open. Now, I didn't think that this was painful whatsoever. It just put a bit of pressure inside trying to open your vagina. And then when they've opened it far enough, they use just like a little, it's like a little bolt and screw that they twist just to make sure that they can hold that in place there then. The next bit that I wasn't sure about, that she spoke to me about, was that it's not necessarily as simple as putting the brush in and finding your cervix. So she said that sometimes that's the most difficult bit for her as a nurse, not difficult in that it hurt or anything, because it didn't at all. I couldn't feel anything really apart from the little bit of pressure. She said it's not quite as straightforward as it just being at the end of the tunnel. So she said sometimes she has to ask people to cough or to kind of sit on their hands try and move themselves around a little bit so she can find where the cervix is on the exact spot that she needs to get with the brush. So she had me cough and then she was suddenly able to see my cervix, so I don't know what that did. She then put the little brush in, and it's very soft, but I have heard that this is the part that people find the most uncomfortable. So when they put the brush in and they start doing a little bit of swabbing, that's when you can feel a little bit more, and it's apparently it's different for different people, as you can imagine, because everyone's different. Some people feel that as quite a rough scratching. I only felt it as if something was brushed, well, I can't really explain it any other way, as if I was being brushed inside. And it's an uncomfortable feeling, didn't like it, nobody's going to enjoy that, I don't think, so nothing about it is comfortable, but it's not painful. For me it wasn't anyway. So she did the little bit of swabbing, and then she took her brush out. She's kind of having a bit of chat with me whilst she was doing it, which was quite nice because that kept me a bit calm. I wasn't like thinking too much about it. She took the swab then and came up towards my head because she had her little table at the side here, and she needed to put, I think it goes in some sort of solution, so she took the cells that she had on the brush, dropped it in some solution and then screwed that on. Now the only issue for me here was that she left the speculum in. Now I imagine that could be common practice, I don't know, this is my first one, but when she took the brush out I was like, whew, thank God she's going to take the speculum out, because the pressure for me then, it was feeling a little bit too much. It wasn't painful at all, but it was just like, I'm really ready to get this over with now. So she went and she started doing the little solution. It's in my head, it's like, just come on woman. She did that for literally like a few seconds, and then she was back to come and take the speculum out. And then that was it. That was the procedure done. It did not take long at all. I think the longest part of it was her, I don't know, when she put it in and then opening it up. That's probably the bit that takes the longest, but it was a really, really quick procedure. I don't think that you need to worry about it in any way. If you have any questions, if I've not kind of covered anything that happened to me in there that you want to ask me, I'm not an expert because obviously it's my first one, but feel free to comment below and ask me any questions and I can try and explain it to you a bit better. If you're still feeling a bit uncomfortable, then I'm happy to kind of have a chat with you and try and make you feel a little bit more comfortable. So she took the speculum out, she was like, well done, told me that there was just a little bit of bleeding from where she'd been brushing, and she said that that's very common, so nothing to worry about. She gave me a bit of tissues before I put my knickers on, but I didn't see any blood myself, so it must have just been on the little brush that she'd had, because I had no signs of blood after. Then, after I got my pants back on and I was sat there and she was talking to me about the results, I'm not going to go through that with you because I'm not a medical professional. I don't want to lead you to think something that's not true, and I don't want to cause any misconceptions. You need to talk to your doctor about that. So she talked to me about what the results could be and what to do, and that I'll get them through the post and whatever. But then she also wanted to talk to me briefly because she'd spotted something when she was looking at my cervix. And she said it was nothing to worry about and that it's quite common, but I have a cervical ectropion, I think it's called. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Cervical ectropion. Right, and she explained it to me, and basically, just in case you have this and you're wondering still, because if you Google cervical ectropion, one of the first links that comes up is embarrassing bodies, cervical ectropion, loads of discharge, disgusting. No, that's not what it is. It can cause something, it can cause discharge and things like that, but it's something that most people go along in their life without knowing unless they've had a smear test and the doctor's told them. So it's nothing to worry about at all. It just basically is to do with the cells. I think the best way, I practiced this already, the best way to explain it, so I brought a sock with me, right? And this is the best way I can think of to explain it. So your cervix is like a little cushion, that's what she explained to me. So you have, this is where your baby would eventually grow, should you have a baby. this is your vaginal wall down here, okay? Your cervix is here. So if you're looking at it like this, that's what she's looking at. She's looking down your vagina to your cervix. Now in the middle you have like a little hole, and that's where they're brushing to get the cells that they need to look at. That's eventually where it'll open, whatever, when you have a baby. I'm not going to talk about baby stuff because that grosses me out. In there you have these set of cells, but above it you have these, I think they're called soft cells, and you have your hard cells here. So sometimes they can drop down a little bit. So what the cervical ectropion is these cells dropping down a little bit, so that it almost kind of forms a little, if it's flat normally, it kind of pokes through a little bit, just through the bottom of the cervix. So what they see when they look at your cervix flat is a little kind of red hoop. So like, I don't know, around the hole you have like a little red polo or a donut, small donut shape that's kind of like those cells coming through. Now apparently that's quite common, and there's nothing, she said if it doesn't bother you, don't bother it, basically. And she explained that sometimes that kind of thing, it can cause a bit more bleeding than usual, so I might, between periods, have a bit of spotting. That's to do with the cervix and the cervical ectropion. But also it can cause bleeding during sex. So, during like the procedure, so that's why I bled during the procedure, so during the smear test. Now the only issue with that is that my sample now, because it has blood in it, when they clean it to clean the cell and get the clean sample of the cells that they need, it might come back as inadequate because they've had to treat it so much that there might be an inadequate amount of the sample for them. So there may be a chance that I have to go back in 3 months' time and go and have another smear test because of the sample being inadequate. That's not something I'm particularly worried about because she said it's quite common, and it might come back fine. And even if you don't bleed, sometimes it can come back inadequate. So it's nothing I'm really worried about, but if you get told you've got a cervical ectropion, I don't think it's anything to worry about. She was very clear about it not causing any problems. Sometimes it can just go away on its own. It's not something that you need to worry about in any way. You can Google it and you can see a picture and see exactly what I mean. It's like a little round redness around the little hole in your cervix. So I hope that I've explained everything nice and clearly. Okay, that was my experience. There are a few other things that I would like to just kind of say that I might have missed already to try and kind of help with you feeling a bit anxious. One of the things that I've seen online, videos, forums and stuff like that, the way that it's spoken about, everyone, well not everyone, basically I think that some people that research this might be under the impression that the speculum goes in further than it does, because from what I've seen online, some people are saying that the speculum goes in and opens your cervix. That's not what happens at all. Don't worry, if you look at a picture of the anatomy of the woman and you think the speculum is going that high up, it's not. Okay, the speculum is very small, it's going into your vagina and just very slightly making your vagina a bit wider so that the brush can go in and get to the cervix. It doesn't need to open the cervix in any way, that does not happen. Don't start panicking about, oh my goodness, this is horrendous, it's gonna, like, I'm gonna be like stretched open. That's not gonna happen until you have a baby. So don't worry about that. It's not your cervix that's being opened, I'd like to clarify that, it's your vagina. And your vagina is made of enough stuff to squeeze a baby's head and shoulders out of it. So if your vagina can open wide enough to squeeze a baby's head, then I think it can open wide enough to fit a brushing. So don't worry about the amount that it's opened. It's not a lot, and it's not your cervix, it's just your vagina, and it's like pressure. basically. It's not pain, it's pressure. Uncomfortable pressure, I'll give you that. I would rather not do it again tomorrow, but it's just pressure. Another thing that you might be a bit anxious about, I actually wasn't anxious about this for some reason, about the getting naked part. It didn't cross my mind for a second that some strange person was going to see my vagina. I think I was much more worried about the whole speculum part, that just completely went out of my mind. If you are worried about the fact that it could be a stranger that's just about to look at your vagina, there's nothing to worry about. That is a medical professional. They will have seen hundreds, possibly thousands of vaginas in their lifetime. They will have seen just as many penises. They will have seen just as many horrible infections. They will have seen just as many things that they would rather not see. And I'm pretty sure that your little vagina is not one of the things that they're like, ugh, don't want to see that. Don't worry about the fact that they're looking at a vagina. They've seen hairy ones, they've seen bold ones, they've seen ones with patterns trimmed into their pubes. They will have seen that whole trend of getting, I don't know what it's called, the diamantes, when people had gems on their vaginas. Just think that all those people, those idiots that got gems on their downstairs area, then had to possibly go and have a smear test and just be like, well, I'm all bedazzled. Or you could have a really embarrassing tattoo as well, just to kind of strike up conversation, make it a little less awkward. You might have the lawnmower going in to shave some of your pubes. That's a legit tattoo, I've seen it with my own eyes. So don't worry about what they think. They're not going to think anything, they're just thinking, oh, I wonder when it's lunchtime, just like the rest of us when we're at work. So don't worry about it. So I hope that my story and what happened to me and how I felt may have helped you in some way if you were feeling really, really anxious. There really isn't much to worry about. If you've had your smear test recently and you have anything to say, you think it wasn't so bad, comment below. If you think it was horrendous, then could you explain which part of it you thought was so bad? Maybe it was the scratching, maybe I don't know, it was the finding of your cervix. So everyone's experience is going to be different. I had an absolutely fine experience because nothing hurt, it was just uncomfortable. So if you've got anything to say or you have any questions, please comment below. Thank you so much for watching.